Alzheimer's and Dementia, Basics and Beyond, Part 2, presented by Alzheimer's Association, Minnesota, North Dakota, 24/7 Information Hotline, 1-800-272-3900.
And how old is she, may I ask? Okay, so if you would have said to me she's 67, I might have said you might want to think about having a more detailed diagnosis. At age 87, I probably wouldn't give that advice because it's not going to change anything. She's in that high-risk category anyway. It's not uncommon for people with that kind of reaction to Aricept, it's okay. Aricept is a Band-Aid for a very short period of time when it works. And it works about half the time. So she happens to be in the half that it didn't, but you don't want her to be sick all the time either. So this is just some more statistics, and you can read those at your leisure. I do want to talk briefly about caregiver impact. And just look at these numbers. In 2012, 15.4 million family and friends provided 17.5 billion hours of unpaid care. That would be valued in today's dollars at $216.4 billion. Think about what we could do if that money could get reinvested into the healthcare system somehow. 15% of caregivers are long distance. You start thinking about if you have to drive more than an hour to be a caregiver or to a treatment or something, and you're back and forth and you're working and you have a family outside of the person that you're taking care of with the disease, and I'm sure none of you have had any kind of stress like that, it can be very, very taxing on a caregiver. At the association, we talk to caregivers all the time about self-care, taking care of yourself, which, let me tell you, as a caregiver is easier said than done. When you're you talk about not being able to remember things and managing multiple events. I mean, I lead a parallel existence right now. I don't even know how I do that some days. But you figure it out. But it's very stressful. So some things that you can do, if you know somebody that's dealing with this, just be there. Particularly with older adults, we hear about friends that sort of disappear. They don't want to spend time with the person that has the disease anymore, partly because I think it's their own mortality. They become very uncomfortable being around somebody that's dealing with this because they're worried about themselves, particularly if they're around the same age. Think of things that are, pardon the expression, outside the box to do. People that ask you, what can I do to help you? Most of us are not inclined to be able to have a list on demand. Here's my list of how you can help me, because most of us are not wired that way, particularly here in the Midwest. We're not real good acceptors of help until it's on our own terms, which is not in any of those caregiving books. All it talks about is people should offer to help, and you should ask for help. I'll ask for it when I'm good and ready. And that's typical of most caregivers, and you have to figure out how to do that. Just listen. Sometimes that being present and just listening to somebody is all they need. They just need somebody to not talk back. Because a lot of times the person with the disease will talk back. So sometimes they just need a sounding board. So just be open to listening. Accepting without judgment. Sometimes we are very, very quick to judge a situation because we've also been a caregiver or we've done this before. I have a colleague at the office whose husband is also dealing with a different type of illness, and she and I sort of have this unwritten language because there's things she can say to me that she knows I understand without explanation. I'm not going to judge her. I'm not going to make any kind of comment because I understand truly what she's going through. So sometimes it's just that unconditional acceptance. And using the past to engage in the present. Particularly somebody that's living with the disease, if they're older, you're having a lot of conversations about the history. They could care less about what was just on the news. They want to talk about 1942 or 1961 or whatever the year is. So you have to become a pretty good historian, and you have to be okay with having conversations in the past tense and really talking about them as if they're present. And I love this quote on the bottom. I am seeking, I am not lost. I am forgetful, I am not gone. So in terms of what we do at the Alzheimer's Association, and we're not going to talk a lot about any of these in particular, but there's lots of supportive services available. We are one of those organizations that people generally don't know about until they need us, and that's only if somebody tells them about us. So you now know about us, and there's a little postcard, kind of a half postcard, that talks about a little bit about what we do. There's also a 1-800 number, which is on the front of the presentation as well as here. This is a 24/7 information helpline, so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a real live person answers that phone. So if you start thinking about something after today, or maybe you know somebody and you have some questions, this is a number you can call at any time, and you're going to actually get a real live person, not a voicemail, not a call back later, a real live body. Monday through Friday during business hours, that line is actually answered here at our offices in Edina, and then off hours and weekends it gets answered at our contact center in Chicago. But it's always accessible. And lastly, I'm going to leave this up here, but you also have a postcard about this, which is a conference we have in March. It'll be on March 1st this year at the St. Paul River Center. If you have a personal interest as a professional or a family member, or you know somebody that might have an interest, this is a fabulous event. We have family scholarships available, so if people have challenges paying for the event for family members, we can drop the cost with a scholarship to $30. So for a caregiver, that's, and in some cases we have paid for the whole thing when we know of situations where they simply cannot even afford $30, but it's important for them to be there. So it's just something to make you aware of. And with that, we have a significant amount of time for your questions. Yeah, the VA has a great program. If you're familiar with their GREC program, they also have both at their St. Cloud location and here very good diagnostic programs as well as day programs for vets. Interesting that you brought up Vietnam, because we're starting to see a correlation with PTSD now and dementia that can evolve into Alzheimer's disease. I just read a study about this. So I anticipate that this is going to be another one of those unique groups where we're going to start to see some very specific research. And obviously with PTSD, there's also concerns about behavior, which when you add dementia into that, can be a very difficult cocktail to manage anyway. So yeah, and we have a really good VA system here. I wouldn't say that that's consistent with all states, but we do a lot with the VA. We do education and training at the VA for both their staff as well as caregivers, and in the nursing home, the long-term care, we do staff and family training there as well. So they're really pretty good.
Could you back up one slide and talk a little bit more about
Back up a slide? Oh gosh.
It's like what's family memory care? I mean, some of these things sound interesting, but it's hard to know what.
Okay, so we'll start at the top.
Okay.
I'll use my cheat sheet. So care consultation would be like going to see a case manager. That type of relationship. It's a one-on-one meeting, typically with the person with the disease, if they're so inclined, as well as family members, to really talk about the plan, what you're going to do as the disease progresses. So at the early stages of the disease, what you're going to do is different than what you're going to be doing later on. So identifying those resources, providing access to resources, materials, all those kinds of things. Care consultation is a fee for service. However, we don't turn anybody away if they can't pay. Typically, we charge for it. Family Memory Care is a grant-funded program whereby a family can make a 6-month commitment to come to monthly family meetings. The person with the disease has meetings. The caregiver has meetings. It's a huge time commitment. The good news is it's free. So this really helps a family sort of navigate, especially early in the disease process, how to navigate that path of the disease. And that we have family memory care providers throughout the state of Minnesota, some that are connected to the Alzheimer's Association and some connected to other organizations in the state. Early stage programs, we have a lot of very specific activities for folks that are in the early stages, or what we call early dementia. So this could be younger onset, this could be older onset, but they're just early, they're newly diagnosed. They do activities like meetup, where they just go out socially. They might go out for coffee, go to a museum, go to yoga class. We do specialized education for them. We also have a group of folks that are mentors. They call people that are just newly getting diagnosed. And so it's the person living with the disease calling the person that just got diagnosed and having the conversation about, you know, gee, this is really lousy, but you know what? Let me tell you about some of the things that I do that are really cool. And so it's that engagement with somebody that actually is talking the talk and walking the walk, as opposed to me. Support groups, we have in Minnesota and North Dakota combined, I want to say about 170 support groups with over 200 facilitators. We have support groups for the caregivers, for people with the disease, for spouses, for adult children. We have some support groups particular to Lewy body dementia and frontotemporal dementia because they're a little bit unique compared to Alzheimer's disease. But some of them are just everybody goes. So they're available on our website as well. Medic Alert Safe Return, you've probably all heard of those Medic Alert bracelets. These are a little unique in that the person with the disease has one, as does their caregiver. On the back of it, it identifies them as having some memory loss, and there's a 1-800 number that links to a national database so that if somebody gets lost and if they get split up from the person they were with, it allows law enforcement staff to dial that number, which actually gets connected to us during business hours. We actually start the triage, if you will, to help locate that individual. Comfort Zone is the GPS counterpart to that. So this is the GPS chip either in your car or you can put it in your wallet or a purse. The problem with the wallet or purse is sometimes the person with the disease tends to forget the wallet or the purse. But if they're still driving, putting it in their car, you can then log into a database that allows you to track, pulls up a map, and you can see where the person is. Typically what they call a comfort zone is a certain radius. So if you're in a small community and the person is driving and they can drive within a 10-mile radius, when they hit mile 11 or beyond 10, it activates an alarm. You can get notified on a smartphone. So it's pretty high tech. I'm very happy this was not in existence when I was in high school. There's other programs like that available. This particular one has a cost, but some of them don't. You can just download them on a smartphone, and if the person has a smartphone, most smartphones have a GPS device in them, which for some people can be a very huge help. Just then they know they can find somebody. Trial Match, this is like how the National Marrow Donor Program has Be the Match. This is the Alzheimer's disease answer to that. So you can sign up to be involved in clinical trials. You can do that on a website. There's some infrastructure challenges with this right now because we're having a difficult time notifying people in particular areas when trials are available. I will tell you that we have submitted a proposal for the Minneapolis-St. Paul area to become more clinical trial friendly because of some of the initiatives we're taking. Lovely expression over there. Because of some of the initiatives we're...
Research community here, I'm really disappointed to hear it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. And we don't have enough of, and that's why. You know, we have the Mayo Clinic, we have the University of Minnesota, there's a lot of research done here, but we need to bring more clinical trials to this area. And so we're hopeful that we're going to be able to do that soon. And obviously professional and community education, which is me.
I'm curious, do you see any correlation with, I don't have the proper term, but with mad cow disease?
Oh.
Getting mixed up with dementia or / Alzheimer's?
It is a type of dementia, actually. It's called Creutzfeldt-Jakob dementia, and it is a type of dementia.
Which, when you say a type of,
It is not Alzheimer's disease.
but is it spurred from eating four-legged creatures?
I am not a person that could say that with absolute certainty, but they call that disease, when it's been identified in humans, Creutzfeldt-Jakob, which is mad cow.
Okay.
But I can't definitively give that to you. I could make it up, but that wouldn't be good. What else can I answer? Yes, ma'am.
My mom's driver's license is becoming due in March.
Uh-huh.
And I was hoping that they would make her take, a written test at the very least.
That's not what you need.
So that they can say,
Mm-hmm.
no, you better not be driving anymore. But they don't do that, do they?
It's not going to be a written test. You need to have her driving assessed, and you need to have it assessed by an occupational therapist. So what you need her primary physician to do is write an order to have a driving assessment done. It's a long test, but it's actual practical testing, things like reaction time and judgment. We talked about with driving with space, judging distance. And then at the end of that test, the occupational therapist has to write a recommendation about whether or not he or she believes the person should be driving, or if there's conditions. So like you can drive within X miles of your house, which is less common in a city. We see those types of restrictions more commonly in a rural area if somebody lives outside of town a little bit, but it kind of depends. but ultimately they can state a recommendation that the person is not safe to drive, which then will require the physician to write a letter to the state. We live in a state that can do that. So if you have a situation with driving and you're trying to get somebody's driving assessed and or a license revoked, not all 50 states do that. So we at least have a mechanism, but you have to get the person assessed. Courage Center does it, and there's a couple of other locations, and depending on your insurance may or may not pay for that. It's a couple $100, but it's worth every penny because it gets you that information that you're looking for.
So Minnesota doesn't have like an age limit where they can say, you know, maybe we should be testing everybody over this age.
Aside from the fact that there's just a little discrimination involved with that, no, we don't. But with respect to dementia, it is a catalyst for getting that driver's assessment done. Now, if you think, you know, your kids don't drive very well, that's not going to work. It's particular to people that have that type of diagnosis or some sort of that whole neurocognitive problem. There's actually 4 that have been FDA approved. Aricept is the most common. Exelon is the next most common. You hear about that one on TV because it has a patch. And so people that have trouble taking pills, sometimes the Exelon patch. We have a drug called Razidine or galantamine. All 3 of those drugs are the same type of drug, which is called a cholinesterase inhibitor. It affects the protein. 3 different pharmaceutical companies. Who knew? Then there's a 4th drug that's a glutamate inhibitor, and that's called Namenda or memantine. And that drug they are giving later, but it's really to treat symptoms. It doesn't treat the disease specifically. It doesn't change the progression.
Right.
And typically it's with Aricept. So we see it a lot of times with Aricept, then they'll also give Namenda or with Exelon. Rarely do we see it alone. But if people have been on Aricept for a while and then they take them off the Aricept, they may keep them on the other one. But those are the only 4 that are FDA approved today. Yes, ma'am. Think about those medications as if they create a plateau. So if you think about a level of functioning, so how people are able to maintain, that's what those drugs help. Aricept is the primary one, and Namenda gives them a little bump. So what they see with Namenda is people maybe stay at home a little bit longer than they would have without those 2 drugs, or they may be able to function at a higher level for a little bit longer. But in about 50% of the people that take it, so if we all take those drugs, half of us are going to have side effects, and so we'll not be able to take it. And of the other 50%, maybe half will see benefit. And so it kind of creates that plateau. For most people, it's somewhere between 12 to 18 months. So there's a lot of discussion even in the field today as to whether or not long-term use of any of these medications is beneficial. But we sort of live in the if it's not broke, don't fix it mentality. So if people do not have a lot of side effects, if they're living okay on the medication, some people say, it's not going to hurt them. Maybe not. You know, you're dealing with a terminal condition anyway, I suppose, so you could have that argument, but we really don't know. And so long-term, you know, if somebody is into the point of in a care facility, it's my opinion they should not be taking these medications anymore. There's really no benefit at that point. And what symptoms they're going to have at that point should be managed by environment, staff training, and not using any medications anyway. I'm not a pill pusher at all. And I'm a music therapist by degree, so I tend to think way more on that non-pharmacologic. You know, people that talk about, well, my mom can't sleep at night, or, you know, one of the first things I will ask is, does your mom drink? And people look at me like, what? It's like, how about a little wine? Or if you had a cocktail with dinner. I mean, some of those things that you think, oh gosh, they're taking medications, they shouldn't have alcohol. Yeah, well, it might actually be better than giving them a pill. And aromatherapy, like lavender and different kinds of scents and things like that, all of that stuff can be very, very beneficial and is much, much higher recommended than drugs.
Do you know if some of those drugs are more closely related to the side effects of aggression or combative behaviors?
I have to think how I should answer this in a politically correct sort of way. I think even, I've worked a lot with the behavioral side of things. I think even with behavior, there are non-pharmacologic mechanisms that should be used before drugs. If you're asking, yeah, typically the drugs like the Seroquel or, is that a bad word? We used to use Risperdal and Haldol like it was candy. Those drugs are not beneficial. Now, the caveat to that is I can share with you one story with a gentleman that was trying to jump out of a 4th floor window. We did give him an injection because it was that or he was going to jump out the window. Those are extreme situations. Most people, when they get aggressive or they're that angry that they're getting aggressive, I want to know what happened to get them there because they're not aggressive by design. And we talk a lot now, CMS, so the Centers for, you all know what that is? Okay. They recently have decided that this type of behavior, which we call being resistive, is not a behavior anymore. It's a response. So you can't give a pill because somebody is resistive. We would all be resistive in the right circumstance. When it changes to a fist, or they go after somebody, or they kick somebody, that's different and very less common. This, the resistive behavior, is very common. And we should expect it.
But none of those medications have that as a side effect to them.
What?
To your knowledge, the Aricept,
Aricept we have seen when we try to take people off of it. We sometimes have trouble. It seems to have a little bit of an addictive quality to it, and we have sometimes seen behavior, at least in my experience, when we've tried to take people off of it, we see behavior that we didn't see before. In that case, we would keep them on it. But maybe we can get the dose down.
What I wanted to ask about is my mom was experiencing hallucinations
Mm-hmm.
and hearing voices.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of?
Hallucinations and delusions, which hearing things, are typically not with an Alzheimer's type dementia. What I would be curious about is dementia with Lewy bodies. Dementia with Lewy bodies, which is becoming more diagnosed, has some very unique characteristics. One is hallucinations and delusions, very common. Another one is problems with gait. So if you've ever seen somebody with Parkinson's walk, where they their ball of their foot sticks to the floor a little bit, they shuffle. And frequently then it's misdiagnosed as Parkinson's. But the other thing is a sleep disturbance. We now know that people that have dementia with Lewy bodies start to have erratic sleep. And I don't mean like, you have a bad night's sleep a couple of times a month. This is really erratic patterns in sleep. So they sleep 2 or 3 hours and then they're up for 8. That's what I would question, because those are very, very unique symptoms to dementia with Lewy bodies for which they can test. Yeah, and that's not an Alzheimer's type dementia. Just like a frontotemporal dementia, where they become, it's almost like they have an obsessive compulsive disorder, they have no filter, they can be very hyperactive, they can be very hyperoral. We tend to see this diagnosed much younger and a much quicker progression. With FTD, we used to call it Pick's disease. We don't do that anymore, but it's not uncommon to see a frontotemporal dementia diagnosed in their 30s. And so when you start digging into these different types of dementia, sometimes an individual's symptoms will be more like one than the other. And then you really want to see the neurologist, particularly with a dementia with Lewy bodies.
She has seen a neurologist. This was like 4 years ago. She's had problems with neuropathy, been on gabapentin and all kinds of things. But they've never done anything up here.
It's probably time.
Wow. Bet you're right.
And one of the things that happens a lot, I think, is as the consumer, we often initiate that process. Because once a physician starts treating for whatever they decide it is, it's only going to change when the patient, which is not likely in this case, or somebody that's with them starts bringing up other things.
Right.
If I've learned nothing as being a caregiver this experience recently, it's that there's not enough people to advocate for the people that don't have a voice, that don't have connections in the system or whatnot. So when you start to think something like that, it's important to bring it to the doctor.
Wow. And her fear is that she won't be up front because she never ever wants to go back to Hastings, Regina. She remembers that. That's a fear. And so she's kind of even pushed me away because she thinks that I'm the one that put her there.
And this would be a situation where you might ask if her neurologist would be open to receiving either an email through a secured email if that's available, or a letter, because sometimes having the face-to-face conversation with the person there doesn't work, so you get creative on how to get around that. Make sure that if you're a power of attorney for her, that you also sign the form at the doctor's office, which I didn't know you had to do. No, there's a release that you have to sign for that physician to actually speak to you or give you any kind of written information about care, and it's outside the parameters of HIPAA. I never knew this.
Is that in addition to the healthcare directive?
Yep. Healthcare directive will do nothing for you.
Well, because
There needs to be that release. So you need to make sure that you have all of the papers, which of course they don't tell you until they tell you, I can't talk to you.
Right.
And then you say, well, I'm the power of attorney, I'm the daughter, I'm the whatever. It doesn't make any difference.
Right.
So you need to make sure that if you want to have that conversation, that you have all of the paperwork that you need. Plan, plan, plan. Goes back to that planning. So we're overtime now. We're after school. So thank you all for coming.